Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking something absolutely wild. We've got a truly historic timeline to go through, doing a day-by-day analysis of an uprising that honestly stunned the world. We're going to break down the exact real-time sequence of events that led to the total collapse of a deeply entrenched 16-year government, literally in just a matter of weeks. So let's just jump right into it.
36 days. Think about that for a second. That is all it took to topple a 16-year regime. It's incredibly rare in modern history to see a government that established unravel with such breathtaking speed. Now, throughout this explainer, you're going to hear a really curious phrase popping up, 36 July. It sounds impossible, right? A month with 36 days? Well, keep that phrase in the back of your mind, because by the time we reach the end of this timeline, you'll see exactly what it means and how it perfectly captures the totally unbroken momentum of this uprising.
Okay, so this whole thing kicks off right at the start of July. And initially, it's largely peaceful. On July 1st, students start boycotting classes and exams, right? They're demanding reforms to the government job quota system. By the 5th, a strike is called at Shahbag. But things really take a leap on July 7th with the Bangla blockade. The students brought out this innovative strategy and completely paralyzed the capital city of Dhaka. And it didn't stay just a student issue for long. Leaders quickly declared it a movement of the farmers, the workers, and really the entire nation. You know, sometimes a single sentence can literally change the course of history? Well, July 14th was exactly that kind of moment. The students had just given the president a 24-hour ultimatum to meet their demands. In response, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina holds a press conference, and she makes what turns out to be a fatal rhetorical misstep. She asks, if not the grandchildren of freedom fighters, will the grandchildren of Razakars get quotas? That one comment was like pouring gasoline on a fire. It was the major catalyst that completely shifted the entire trajectory of the movement. And talk about an immediate cause and effect. That very night, following that press conference, a midnight outrage just sweeps through the university campuses. See, the students felt deeply insulted by the Razakar label, which is a highly charged term associated with traitors during the 1971 war. So they literally poured out of their residential halls into the night, staging these massive protest marches. The peaceful daytime blockades we saw earlier had suddenly transformed into this incredibly emotional, nocturnal, nationwide outcry. Moving into July 15th and 16th, this is really the turning point. This is where things descend into actual violence. The government's mockery continues, and political leaders actively incite their student wing, the Chhatra League, to respond. By 3 p.m. on the 15th, they start violently attacking students at Dhaka University. And then, the very next day, the movement witnesses a massive tragedy. An unarmed student named Abu Sayed is shot and killed by police in Rangpur. 6 people total were killed in a single day by police fire and political faction attacks. At this point, the conflict is absolute.
So July 17th and 18th hit, and the state cracks down hard. It's a severe, multi-step response. First, university administrations forced the residential halls to close, basically trying to evict the movement's core base. Second, the government actually pulls the plug on the internet nationwide to throttle their communication. The Prime Minister gives this brief 8-minute address where she looks noticeably pale and frightened. But here's the thing, the crackdown completely backfires. Instead of going quiet, private university students, who hadn't been super involved before, take to the streets with sticks. The protests spread to 47 districts, and with the death toll now sitting at 28, the students announce a complete shutdown.
75. Just let that number sink in for a moment. On July 19th alone, 75 deaths were reported. Areas like Chhatrabari turned into literal battlefields with massive clashes, vandalism, and arson. The sheer scale of the casualties on this single day was so staggering that it prompted the student coordinators to issue a formal 9-point demand, and notably, that included a direct call for the Prime Minister to apologize. Faced with those 75 deaths and the new 9-point demand, the government responds on July 19th and 20th by escalating control to the absolute maximum. They impose a shoot-at-sight curfew. The military is deployed directly onto the streets. Any broadband connections that were still up, completely severed. The country is plunged into a total information blackout. And crucially, this is exactly when the detective branch, or DB, starts snatching up key coordinators of the movement, like Nahid Islam and Asif Mahmood, right in the middle of the night.
Over 2,000. That's how many arrests happened in just a 5-day window between July 17th and 22nd. Despite the military presence in the curfew, the streets were still incredibly volatile. So police launched these aggressive block raids to try and reassert control. And it wasn't just the protesting students getting rounded up either. Members of opposition parties like the BNP and Jamaat were heavily targeted in these massive sweeps too.
Right around July 22nd, there's a slight lull in the protests, and the government clearly feels like it's getting the upper hand again. During a meeting with business leaders, right in the middle of these ongoing block raids, the Prime Minister delivers this very firm, unyielding message to the public. She says, "Sheikh Hasina doesn't run away." It's a quote that serves as a really memorable anchor for just how confident the government felt at the peak of its police operations.
Now, July 25th really highlights a massive, glaring disconnect between the state and the streets. On one hand, you have the Prime Minister visiting a damaged metro rail station, literally breaking down in tears over the destruction of digital and electronic infrastructure. But on the other hand, the students are out there facing a brutal reality. Mounting casualties, overflowing hospitals, mass arrests. Seeing the Prime Minister weep for property damage while students were dying generated a massive wave of public criticism.
Following that PR disaster, between July 26th and 28th, we see this really controversial coercion tactic unfold. The detective branch actually goes into hospitals and takes movement coordinators who were there receiving medical treatment back into custody. While they've got them under police control, they coerce these leaders into recording a video message declaring the protests are over. But it was a total backfire. Other student leaders immediately recognized the video was forced. They openly rejected it, and instead, they called for even more protests.
Which brings us to July 30th, and this fascinating visual war for public support. The government declares a national day of mourning and asks citizens to wear black badges. In direct defiance of this, the students announce a Remembering Our Heroes campaign. They urge people to wear red cloths and change their Facebook profile pictures to red. The result? A literal digital sea of red. This visual clash made it overwhelmingly obvious which side the vast majority of the country actually stood with.
We are absolutely at the climax now. August 3rd, after immense public pressure and a grueling 32-hour hunger strike, the detained coordinators are finally released. Massive crowds, we're talking students, parents, teachers, journalists, professionals, gather at the Shahid Minar monument. At 3 p.m., coordinator Nahed Islam takes the stand and he permanently shifts the entire focus of the movement. It wasn't about quotas anymore. This was the one-point demand: the complete resignation of Sheikh Hasina and her cabinet, paired with a call for a nationwide non-cooperation movement.
98. That is the devastating death toll for just one single day, August 4th. The government's reaction to the one-point demand was desperate. With all state forces and ruling party members mobilized to crush the non-cooperation movement, the streets witnessed absolutely horrific violence. The mobile internet was shut down yet again as the state made one final, desperate push to regain control through sheer force.
And that brings us to August 5th, the final day. The students had actually planned a massive march to Dhaka for the 6th, but because of the extreme bloodshed, they strategically moved it up a day. Despite a strict shoot-at-sight curfew, an unstoppable tide of people from places like Ghazipur broke right through the barriers and flooded the capital. The pressure was just insurmountable. At 2:30 p.m., Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina resigned and fled the country by helicopter, seeking refuge in India. Jubilant, victorious crowds immediately stormed the Gana Bhavan, the official residence. The 16-year rule was absolutely over.
Okay, so remember at the very beginning when I mentioned 36 July, here's what that actually means. It's a symbolic date born directly out of this movement. Because the protests began in July and carry this unbroken, continuous momentum right through to the government's fall on August 5th, the protesters essentially refused to acknowledge the start of a new month. They took July's 31 days, added the 5 days of August, and made 36 July. It immortalizes the relentless singular timeline of the uprising. It's a testament to the fact that the fire ignited in July did not burn out until the regime fell.
Which leaves us looking at the aftermath of an incredibly dense, rapid historical event. We've traced the path from a peaceful quota reform demand to a 36-day revolution that completely dismantled a 16-year entrenched administration. It really shows you how quickly the mechanics of power can fail when faced with overwhelming, unified public momentum. But of course, a massive void has now been created, so I'll leave you with this to reflect on. After 16 years of unified rule abruptly ending in an afternoon helicopter flight, where does Bangladesh's future go from here? Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this timeline, and as always, keep questioning the history happening right in front of us.